Pattern that psychiatrist Carl Jung noticed throughout his decades of clinical work that contradicts everything we think we know about strength. The patients who walked into his office carrying the deepest wounds, the ones who had absorbed the most pain from the world around them, often emerged as the most powerful forces for transformation, not in spite of their breaking, but because of it. Here's what's paradoxical. We live in a culture that treats sensitivity as weakness and emotional breaking as failure. We're told to toughen up, build walls, protect ourselves from feeling too much. But Jung discovered something that challenges this entire framework. The empaths who shattered most completely, who felt the world suffering so intensely they could barely function, possessed a hidden capacity that those who never broke could never access. This isn't a story about resilience. It's about alchemical transformation. And by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why the journey through complete psychological fragmentation creates a kind of strength that cannot be built any other way. A strength that Jung himself called the union of opposites, the integration of shadow, and the birth of the individuated self. But first, we need to understand what actually happens when an empath breaks. Most people think empathy is simply the ability to feel what others feel. That's not quite right. True empaths, the kind Jung worked with, don't just mirror emotions. They absorb the unprocessed psychological material of everyone around them. They become repositories for collective pain, family trauma, and unexpressed suffering that has nowhere else to go. Imagine walking into a room and feeling not just your own anxiety, but the suppressed rage of your father, the unspoken grief of your mother, the ambient terror that 3 generations refuse to acknowledge. That's not metaphor. That's the daily experience of deep empaths. Their nervous systems haven't learned the boundary between self and other. Or perhaps more accurately, their psyches are structured differently from birth. More porous, more receptive, more vulnerable to the invisible currents that most people never detect. Jung called this phenomenon psychological contagion, and he observed it most profoundly in those he termed the wounded healers. These were individuals whose own sensitivity made them lightning rods for collective suffering. They didn't choose this role. It chose them, often in childhood, when their developing psyches were too young to understand what was happening. Here's where it gets interesting. When these empaths are young, they develop what Jung called the persona, an elaborate mask designed to function in the world despite carrying all this absorbed pain. They become the peacemakers, the caregivers, the ones who hold everything